Hey everybody, welcome to For Food's Sake, the podcast bringing you down-to-earth dialogues about the food on your plate and its many impacts on people and the planet. My name is Matteo De Vos, and without further ado, let's talk about food.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to the For Food's Sake podcast. Today we talk to Melanie Swan about blockchain in the food industry. Melanie is a philosopher and blockchain theorist at the University of Purdue in the US. She's also the founder of several startups that include the Institute of Blockchain Studies, DIY Genomics, Group Purchase, and the MS Futures Group. So today, Melanie and I will be discussing about how blockchain, which is this new emerging technology, could completely disrupt the food industry, the way that we shop for our food, the way that we interact with farmers, and the way that we generally engage with local food communities. Now, if you haven't heard of blockchain technology, you might have heard instead about the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. Now, blockchain technology is just essentially the technology that underpins that cryptocurrency. You could say that Bitcoin runs on blockchain software. Now, we'll start this episode by defining the concept of blockchains, which to many, including myself, is often tricky to get your head around, and which is, despite all the hype around Bitcoin and blockchain, often misunderstood. We'll then see how blockchain technology has already started to permeate the food industry, how big food business in particular is already starting to leverage the technology to drastically improve operational efficiency, reduce costs, and to improve overall transparency of its supply chains. Now, just to give you an idea of how disruptive this technology could be for big food business, IBM and Walmart have been working together on a pilot study to demonstrate the benefits of tracking food products using blockchain. Just by scanning a QR code on a packet of sliced mangoes, the technology was able to retrieve details such as the location of the farm, the batch numbers, the factory and processing data, expiration dates, and shipping details. Now, retrieving the data using today's technology is a process that usually takes around 7 days, and blockchain was able to do it in 2.2 seconds. So when it comes to tracking contaminated foods or fraudulent food products, it's pretty clear that blockchain has an enormous amount of potential. In the episode, we'll also talk about how blockchain technology could truly empower consumers, how it could facilitate the buying of products in line with our values, how the technology could help generate a seamless autonomous sharing economy, and how it could also empower end-user data ownership and behavior in ways that just currently aren't possible. We'll then finish by considering how blockchain could in the future also address global issues such as hunger, malnutrition, and food waste. So without further preamble, let's talk about blockchain with Melanie Swan. We have Melanie Swan on the line. Melanie, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you on the podcast, Matteo. Thank you.
Before we dive in, let's first start with you. For those who aren't quite familiar with the work that you're doing, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and describe what you do and what you've been up to lately?
My background has been mostly in technology startups, and I'm currently in academia at Purdue University. I'm a blockchain theorist and a philosopher of emerging technologies more generally, and I'm quite excited to talk about blockchain food with you today.
Great, and blockchain is definitely one of those terms that we're hearing more and more of in the tech world and in mainstream media in general. But I think it's also probably one of the most misunderstood terms. So for those that aren't so familiar with what blockchain is, but keep hearing it pop up, could you maybe explain in layman's terms what blockchain is?
Sure. It's definitely a confusing term. So a blockchain is basically just some kind of secure online record of something. It's a distributed ledger technology that enables open and trusted exchange on the internet without having to have a third-party intermediary in the middle. So the trusted exchange could be of money, assets, information confirmation, or identity confirmation. The key idea is that previously everything we've done so far with computing and the internet has been transfer of information over simple networks. And now we're starting to be able to transfer value, money or information more securely on smart networks. You could think about blockchain, conceptually, it's just a software protocol. So just like SMTP is a network protocol that allows me to send email on the internet, so too is blockchain a protocol for being able to send money on the internet or securely confirming information on the internet. Bitcoin is one of the biggest and first applications using blockchain technology, and that's a digital currency system similar to PayPal. But blockchain is underlying network technology that allows this secure transfer of money, value, or information.
Okay, and I often hear as well with blockchain and with Bitcoin in particular that it's a way also, it's a different way of looking at trust. People often talk about, let's take banks, for example, that we normally now go through an intermediary when we want to transfer money, and the intermediary, of course, being a bank. But that with blockchain, we have an opportunity to almost bypass the intermediary and have a more peer-to-peer system. Could you explain that a little more?
Sure, that's right. So the word trust, right now I need to trust my bank to manage the account I have with them, but blockchain is a distributed system where you trust the network software. You don't have to have a bank in the middle confirming the transaction. And so the idea is that there might be much greater access to people worldwide for banking services on smart networks as opposed to through the traditional hierarchical models of banks. Distributed models are much more scalable and can reach more people. And that the beauty is that the software is typically open source, so you can review exactly what the software is doing to confirm transactions, as opposed to when your bank turns you down for a loan, for example, we don't have a lot of transparency about what goes into that decision. But any bona fide agent in good standing on a smart network, if you have money in your wallet, the network will just check and transact it with another party's wallet if your transaction is valid. So the key point is we could trust the software network. We don't have to have a third-party intermediary in the form of a human-run institution in the middle.
Okay, and if I understand correctly, I think one of the benefits that people are projecting as well is that it's a system that's much harder to cheat, almost to commit fraud with. Is that also true? How does that work?
Yes, there's another feature of blockchain is that it's an immutable or tamper-resistant ledger. So every transaction that's ever happened is stored in a cryptographically linked or chained ledger system, such that it's not possible to, it's much more fraud resistant.
Okay, and so what stage are we at here? I mean, it sounds like a lot of potential, but apart from, Bitcoin, and I think Ethereum's another currency that I've heard of. What stage are we at?
So the stage is, it's really, blockchain is like a new phase of the internet. So it's like the internet all over again, which means that it'll take decades for everything to fully roll out. And because blockchain deals with money and assets, there's more sensitivity, and so it could take even longer than the internet. So we would really want to think about mainstream adoption by individuals and industries on the basis of decades. So we're about almost 10 years into the blockchain, the initial phases of the blockchain. So this is really like the early days of the internet, when a lot of people have heard about it and know a little bit about what it is, but not everybody's using digital ledger technologies yet. The phase is that every different industry is starting to have working groups and white papers and ideas about the kinds of applications that would work for that industry, whether food or healthcare or financial services, supply chain and logistics. And so just like the internet, we're sorting out what are the obvious applications that really make sense here and starting to implement them. The financial services industry is most ahead on blockchain initiatives and implementing digital ledgers for clearing securities, for example, and the worldwide banking system for real-time payments. So financial services is by far the leader in terms of adopting blockchain technologies so far, but they really apply to every industry, and it will certainly take decades for a full rollout of everything.
But once it's fully rolled out, is this something that you could see having the same type of transformational potential that the internet itself had?
Yes, even more so, because what's implied, the whole structure of our society right now is dictated by the cost of doing business and that our current processes for operating, whether in government or corporations. And so what's implied by moving more towards being an automation society, blockchain economy, a computationally based economy, is that the physical footprint of our institutions, corporations, governments, everything could shrink. And so the longer term impact of re-engineering economics and government with blockchains is that the shape and form of our societal processes could change significantly over time, more so than with the internet.
And so you're seeing this first happen, like you mentioned, in the financial sector specifically, I guess with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. But do you also already see this happening? I mean, specifically now, let's focus on food. I mean, what kind of impact could blockchains have on the wider food industry? And are we seeing that already?
Sure. So already in many industries, there are different kinds of blockchain initiatives, healthcare, insurance billing chains, supply chain applications, Internet of Things, and specifically in food too, there have been some announcements, and it's always important to separate out to discern, is this a marketing announcement because blockchain is the cool new thing and firms like to seem modern by having blockchain initiatives, or what's really under it, that's under the announcement that's really happening. And so in the food industry, there are some blockchain initiatives, substantial initiatives underway. And those include probably some of the biggest kinds of applications are food safety, food provenance, and possibly food ingredients in the future. But because there are so many scandals of food contamination, I guess the World Health Organization estimates that 420,000 people die each year of food contamination. And certainly food contamination scandals are high risk and bad business for food producers. So ways to track the safety and provenance of food is establishing the secure custody chain of where food has come from and traveled to through its different nodes in the supply chain is quite important for food safety. And so trying to trace this, a secure means of tracing the food history and provenance is an important application. And for example, there has been a Walmart IBM blockchain announcement about tracking food transportation and safety, and other large food companies have had a variety of announcements of projects in this area.
Okay, and so, for example, with the IBM Walmart example, I mean, what concretely are we seeing changing? How does it work exactly?
So for consumers, we would hope to see something in the future that So, for example, right now the RFID codes are on every kind of product for pricing, for checkout in stores, and so it's possible that with that code or with a QR code now on every food product, a consumer could check with their mobile phone the provenance and safety track of that product. So that would be sort of the obvious future end for consumers, is that there is a QR code on every product where you can do a blockchain lookup on demand and track exactly the provenance of this food product. Right now in the food industry, these announcements are mainly for, I take these announcements to be mainly for internal purposes of decreasing risk by tracking food provenance and reducing the possibility of contamination issues, as well as to increase efficiency or decrease cost. So a key aspect of blockchain is that because of this online secure tracking of information and money together, it means that we can marry two kinds of operations in business processes, which is secure information confirmation plus financial transactions. So the benefit for food companies moving to shared ledgers in the food supply chain would be that there could be much quicker financial clearing of the different steps of receivables and ordering. So having more security or having more knowledge, more confirmed knowledge about the financial side can help the operational side move more quickly. So I think what we'd start to see is internally for large food companies, the ability to manage their own processes in more of a streamlined way and to connect with supply chain partners more efficiently as well.
So with big food industry, I mean, it sounds like you said it's very much internal. It's I guess about cutting costs and streamlining supply chains, and then from the consumer's point of view, at least, I mean, they'd theoretically be able to check where every single product that they're buying, they'd be able to check almost instantaneously, from farm to fork where it's coming from and the kind of journey of the food. But I'm kind of beyond these food giants, because I think I almost intuitively have a concern that a technology like blockchain, as promising as it is and as decentralized as it sounds, because it certainly sounds like it has a very democratic potential. It's not something that could be easily hijacked or hacked by one corporation or another. But I mean, how could blockchain's decentralized system really kind of help bring, I guess, local food communities together and empower people rather than just corporations?
Right. Yes, exactly. Because it seems that since we see a lot of large, big food announcements about blockchain, we wonder if the blockchain is a kind of technology that shifts balance of power to the larger players, and what might that do? So the point, though, is that just like the internet, blockchain is a new technology for everybody, for every size of segment in the market. And initially, certainly big food companies have the money to make the investment in blockchain. But really, the blockchain gives more specificity, more granularity, more detailed tracking to everybody. And so what this means is that on that QR code that's on every product, that could just as easily tie to many different kinds of value systems that consumers want to support. And so that could include different kinds of a composite measure of the degree of local inputs of the product, organic, corporate social responsibility, fair labor practices, energy neutral producers, green food ratings. The whole product life cycle and recycling has been considered. Are green resources used in the production of this? To what degree are food producers employee owned? What's the personal story behind the people that have made this food? So I think what the beauty of blockchain is that all kinds of details can be supported and consolidated in one kind of rating or code. And so the different values that consumers have can be supported by blockchain. So there are two things. Not only could consumers participate in more easily in a locally produced food and consuming and patronizing locally produced food, but also local co-ops could exist. And so, for example, one radical idea of this is, for example, we can have like Uber for microgreens. So say in my local community, some people have hydroponic greens producing units in their homes, but you could have real-time, on-demand peer sharing of overproduced microgreens. So I have lots of things that bloom today that I can't possibly use all of these microgreens. So I want to share them Uber-like with my community. So I can just check my app for who has fresh microgreens today in my local peer community and go by and reserve them, go by, pick them up, and pay for it with my e-wallet with community coin for the local food co-op. And then that because it's a cryptocurrency, it's convertible to Bitcoin or dollars or anything immediately. But our local community coin helps us track who's producing and consuming microgreens in our local community. So that's just one level of this new kind of digital citizen peer supplied infrastructure in the community. So maybe I have microgreens, maybe you produce energy from your solar panels. So we just have more of a peer-based local economy for sharing resources. That's one level. Then another level of community coin could be the local farm co-op. And so where that local farm is producing organic farming, organic food, and then me as a consumer at the farmer's market can use that community coin to patronize different kinds of businesses at my local farmer's market. And again, with this QR code, find out information about the food, where it came from, how far away it came from, its organic, the pesticides used on it, the worker participation or worker-owned aspects of this local farm co-op. And then the third level would be finding out the same kind of information for big food produced products. So still, maybe I'm shopping from the Big Ten to some degree because those products are at the grocery store. But I do still want to know about corporate social responsibility, energy neutral, carbon neutral footprints of these big food companies. And all of this information could also be contained in the blockchain-based food rating, so that not only can I know the provenance and safety of this food, but also these other attributes about its production that I want to support.
That's fascinating. I mean, especially the QR code. I feel like it has an enormous potential also. So not only for transparency, but for marketing purposes, it would totally transform a company's image if, they were to market one thing and then you'd find out through your QR code essentially that, what they're marketing is just marketing. I mean, I feel like it really opens the door to making everything as transparent and clear as possible and kind of giving the consumer a lot more purchasing power and a lot more kind of choice, really, because they can really kind of know the story behind the food.
Right, exactly. And to that point, another thing that could be built into this large number of things that blockchain can connect up and track in real time might be the financial interest of big food companies in terms of their contributions to lobbyist funds, or to the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association. So you could include in our green rating for this food financial interest tracking for the other kinds of activities that companies engage in.
And just on this cryptocurrency, you were talking about community coin. Would it essentially mean that you would have, different currencies for different activities almost? So maybe a community coin for what you buy locally, and then a different type of coin for a different type of transaction that would also, I guess, make things more transparent and easier to track. Is that how it works?
Yes. Yeah, so the benefit of having multiple different kinds of currencies they have different domains, but they're all, because they're cryptocurrencies, they're all readily convertible to each other. So you wouldn't need to worry about, say, exchange rate risk, like if you own Venezuelan pesos or something. So you could have a local community coin for your participation in the hydroponics and energy economy in your neighborhood, for example, and other community coin that you use at the local farmers market. And you could have, Monsanto coin that you participate in that economy with. So the point is that currency becomes more like a token for coordinating activity in groups. It's a money still, but it also has more properties that allow us to do different things. And so, for example, one reason why local sharing economies, it's hard for them to work is it's hard to track unobtrusively who contributes and who consumes. And so a blockchain or a local community coin can just track in the background all of that, because it's ugly and hard to do that in practicality with people. So if I have excess energy produced by my solar panel, it's really a pain for me to go around and try to collect on that. But if we're all participating in an automated blockchain system where I have already my account already just automatically pays for additional power units I use and tracks who has come to pick up my excess microgreens. All of that seamless coordination around money and producing and consuming is just taken care of in the background by something like a local coin. And so that facilitates what we're wanting, which is perhaps more local living as opposed to depending on very large entities.
That's fascinating. It reminds me as well. I was doing a little bit of reading on Bitcoin and on blockchains, that there's a lot of what are called initial coin offerings at the moment, and I guess that's kind of is that essentially, correct me if I'm wrong here, but companies launching, let's say, their own coin for a specific purpose. And when you buy that, it's, I guess, a way for you to, it's almost like shares. It's showing that you not only trust, but you see the potential of that company or of that coin. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, so initial coin offerings it's sort of similar to an initial public offering, but instead of investing in the equity of the company, you're investing in a specific project of the company. So it's sort of like the idea of Kickstarter, but on a bigger scale and in the crypto space. So the benefit is that if you just invest in a project, that's easier and more liquid for both the company receiving the investment and for investors. Both sides can get in and out much more easily than when you own equity in a company. However, these initial coin offerings have the SEC in the U.S. has said that these initial coin offerings, in many cases, look a lot like stock, like an IPO, and as such are regulated. So most of initial coin offering issuance in the U.S. is going away or becoming a regulated kind of thing, meaning available only to wealthy investors. Because the risk is that maybe a lot of these initial coin offerings, everybody's getting excited about raising money through these new mechanisms, but there might not be safeguards as to, is the company actually doing a real project on the other side? So there could be a lot of risk in this idea of initial coin offerings. And so that's why the SEC in the US has said that they're regulated entities. China recently, 2 weeks ago, banned them completely. So every different country is figuring out what it wants to do in a regulatory way about these initial coin offerings. It's a new flavor of financial investment. But as it relates to what we were just talking about, it's initial coin offering is it's a new way of using money in a project for raising money and rewarding those that invest in it. So community coin, just like community coin becomes a token or tracking mechanism for who contributes and who consumes, initial coin offerings are conceptually similar in trying to offer those who understand the project a way to participate and support the project, like a Kickstarter. But they're in the current mode. The SEC in the U.S. has said they're like securities, and so we'll probably be seeing a lot fewer initial coin offerings in the U.S. And certainly they wouldn't be applying to these situations like a local community coin.
So what the sense I'm getting here is that there seems to be, I mean, it's in its very early stages, and of course governments are trying to, react and regulate the best they can, I guess against, potential bubbles maybe, or like you were saying, fake projects. And is there a threat that, especially governments here, more so than I guess private industries, that governments will overregulate this and essentially kill off or limit the potential that blockchains have in truly decentralizing trust?
Yeah, so it's again, I guess it's similar to the internet. That maybe early in the internet looked like, it's just a way for money laundering or all these illegal activities. But then any new technology is about both illegal. Anybody will come into the new technology, both criminal users as well as bona fide users. And so governments realize, so certainly with blockchain, government regulation is one of the biggest drivers in the market. And whatever country you're in, it's important to pay attention to which government bodies are regulating what you're wanting to do with the blockchain. The EC has not had a lot of circumscribing regulation in regard to blockchains so far. And there are examples of regulation acting too quickly and in too much of a broad brush way that has shut down business and innovation. And so an example of this was the New York Bitcoin license, which a couple of years ago, New York said, great, sure, blockchain technology is legal, and if you want to use it, get yourself a license. And so that was too early and too onerous. And so that effectively shut down business innovation in blockchain. What is happening more so in many countries is regulators learning about the technology and taking a measured approach. So this is my interpretation of the US SEC. They're very carefully looking at everything and not wanting to just outlaw everything. That's Pyrrhic. It's not counterproductive. And so I think we would expect an integrated approach as regulators continue to learn about technologies, as new things happen in the market, and regulators trying to protect against risk. But it doesn't work to just completely outlaw blockchain. And an interesting example is China, because it's such a big market that they act in a more of a broad brush way. So for example, completely outlawing initial coin offerings, as well as the exchanges, ordering the exchanges that cryptocurrency has been trading on to close. So this is very, very broad brush and did have an impact on the market value of Bitcoin. But on the other hand, there are other different kinds of blockchain businesses that the Chinese government is happy to support. So a lot of the Bitcoin chip manufacturing, as well as the mining facilities, are in China, and China has not made any move to curtail that activity.
Okay, that's really interesting. I feel like we're still very much, I guess, in the early stages of Bitcoin and blockchain, and and as it transforms, I guess we'll get a better idea of how it can play a decisive role, especially I think in what interests me most is of course in the food industry. But do you have any final thoughts of how you see this progressing generally, blockchains, but also I guess specifically in the food industry, and what you'd recommend for people to look out for as blockchain develops?
To look out for or to develop. There's so much opportunity now for entrepreneurs. It's really like greenfield opportunities. So I think when I think about blockchain, I like to think about, well, what does the technology enable that's new that we couldn't do before? What can we do now with blockchain? Like this like this Uber for microgreens in my own in my own community. So I think one thing that has been, so we know what kind of problems can we work on. So food is tied to health, like diabetes and obesity. And one thing we've just never had is an easy, unobtrusive, automated way to track food consumption, a food diary. So we had different ways. You could take a picture of a meal with your smartphone, and there would be an imputed calculation of the caloric value. But none of this, we don't really have an automated food diary mechanism. And so I think that one thing that could happen with with every product in the store having a QR code, then at the checkout, my receipt collects all of the information of every product I've purchased. And this can be, and then there's a measure of how often. So maybe every week I go to the grocery store, all of my purchases are known by a certain application, and track the frequency with which I have bought certain food items. I have certain numbers of people in my household. And so there could be some sort of automated guessing as to how much of what type of food is consumed when. And so all with these QR codes on food products. And so there could be some sort of effort towards an automated diary of food consumption that could then also link to other attributes like caffeine consumption, the microbiome, where our food and vitamin intake relates to our health issues in many different ways, and even our prescription compliance. A lot of people don't take their prescription drugs, which may or may not have food requirements, relations with food. So I could see a more automated, unobtrusive, automated infrastructure for every kind of thing that I'm consuming with my body and how that's impacting my health. That's one kind of application that could be new.
But the key here being, sorry, just to interrupt, the key here being that it would be decentralized and so not owned by one institution, because I think what people might fear here is very much that it sounds like an enormous collection of personal data that some institution or private corporation could exploit for their benefit.
Yeah, exactly. And worries about health insurance and discrimination on that basis. So yes, thank you for underlining that key property, which would be user-owned. There are operations like HealthBank in Switzerland that then not only does the user own and control their own data, a user can then permission it into health studies or sell it. Why should Google sell my personal profile information? Maybe I want to monetize it myself. So that would be more, how can we use blockchain to empower end user data ownership and behavior in ways that we couldn't before. And then the second huge class of problems that we might want to work on in food is in regard to hunger, waste, and starvation, nutrition adequacy. So I noticed that the UN Food and Agriculture Organization says that 1 in 9 people worldwide are suffering from hunger. And so hunger is thought to be a political problem, not a supply problem, that we have enough food in the world and can produce enough food, but it's just not getting to those 1 in 9 people who are hungry. And so could you have some kind of idea like Kiva for hunger? You have a digital food wallet, some sort of person level allotment of basic food sustenance supplies that you could track. Now, the key point with blockchain is this secure tracking on demand. It's all on the blockchain. And so could you have some kinds of means of tracking that person level food allotment actually gets to the last mile to that person? And people have, not necessarily on a smartphone, but it could be a QR code based SMS message on a flip phone, to pick up the weekly food packet. So is there some way we could do Kiva for hunger with blockchains? Would be one idea. And then, and this could also tie into nutrition adequacy, which is a related issue. But then food waste is also an issue worldwide. And so could you have, say, with an application like Open Bazaar, which is a decentralized eBay software that's available, could you make a local market in your city for distributing food waste? So every restaurant or cafeteria every day has a lot of food, excess food. And so rather than having it go to waste, could you have some kind of Uber or local exchange between food product retailers and restaurants and consumers? So if I'm a hospital or a shelter, perhaps I can go on this app and find out which restaurants are having what kinds of excess food available today, bid for it at lower than market price, of course, and connect up supply and demand for processing excess food resources.
Wow, that's fascinating, especially just in terms of, I guess, efficiencies, and it just feels like a way to almost automate and streamline everything and kind of just straighten out a lot of inefficiencies, and like you mentioned as well, for food distribution, not just food waste, but for aid programs, just being able to confirm that the food aid actually got to where it's supposed to get to. I mean, in terms of the implications for corruption and everything are enormous. I mean, the political implications behind this are huge too in this technology.
Yes. Absolutely. Right. So it's blockchain is a secure automation technology that can support value systems that we also want to support.
That's great. I think this it's definitely getting me more excited about blockchain, and I can see why there's such a buzz around this topic. Melanie, do you have any final words of wisdom, maybe for people that are really interested in blockchain and don't quite grasp it yet and how it works? Some tips of where they could go and maybe perhaps where they could follow the work that you're also doing?
Sure. So I think for anybody interested in blockchain, one way to get involved is check out the local meetups. There's a Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ethereum deals with smart contracts, and Bitcoin cryptocurrency. So there are at meetup.com. There are all kinds of meetups in many cities worldwide. So you can just check out the local meetup as one way of learning about this technology. Also on YouTube, there are many great videos about how can I write a smart contract. So the crypto world, most of the software is open source. So it's merely learning how to use it. So I would try to take advantage of that. And right now there is so much opportunity for figuring out how could a cryptographic application help in this particular problem I'm trying to solve? What's a problem in my domain, and how can I solve it? And is something like blockchain technology something that could help? Then for me, I currently have a book project looking for chapters on the impact of blockchain economics. So if anybody is interested in contributing a book chapter to this project, they could check out blockchainstudies.org.
Fantastic. Melanie, thanks so much. I'll be sure to include all of these details in the show notes so that people can check it out and that they can find out a little bit more about yourself and about blockchain.
Great, super. Thank you so much for having me on the show today, Matteo.
If If you want to know more about Melanie's work or about blockchain in general, you can start by checking out the show notes below. I'd particularly recommend an entertaining and insightful documentary about Bitcoin on Netflix called Banking on Bitcoin. It should help you better understand what cryptocurrencies are, what Bitcoin is, and what blockchain is. In our next episode, I'll be talking about my 30-day vegan challenge, which I recently completed. As always, I'll provide a critical analysis of what worked for me and what didn't, some tips and tricks for those that want to try the diet, and I'll focus particularly on why I decided not to continue with my vegan diet. That is it for now. As always, guys, if you like this episode or the podcast in general, the best way you can currently support it is by rating, reviewing, and subscribing via iTunes, by recommending the podcast to friends and family that you might think are interested, and by following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The handle for all those social media platforms is For Food's Sake Me. And of course, you can stream the episodes directly by going onto our website, which is www.forfoodsake.me. I'll see you next time.